Dad was a storyteller, engineer, frugal, task maker.
Inquisitive. I never met someone who had so many questions about the world around him.
Where he grew up was on the farm. He was a genius at the sorts of skills that you could learn on farming. He was a craftsman of all sorts.
Dad grew up in Burlington, Iowa.
He skipped a few grades because he was so bright, and then went right on to university, receiving a doctorate at the age of 29.
He was actually on his way out to the East Coast when he was invited by a dean at the University of Missouri to stop by. And at that time, the dean kind of twisted his arm and said, let's get some things going with this new thing called chemical engineering. And he never looked back. So that's how he got to the University of Missouri. He actually was on the faculty at that time when World War II broke out. You know, the war effort took him over into England and eventually into France and then Germany.
He captured a German military hospital by accident, just walking into it, not knowing he was that close to the front line. But he walked into this hospital, multi-story building, and the general in charge surrendered to him, gave him the sword, the flag, the whole 9 yards, and Dad ordered them to continue operating on their patients.
He's a German speaker, so he actually spoke to quite senior people. His task was to put in water supplies and purification, that type of thing.
And so when he came back, he still had his job with the University of Missouri, but it certainly took him all the way around the world to do that.
He had a lot of students, including a lot of foreign students, and he would bring them by the house, and we would all have dinner together. And so we had the chance to meet students from all over the world.
It was a great learning experience. It was like having the United Nations right there in your living room.
He really valued the energy of youth and its interests. He would take me wherever he was going. And I ended up touring a lot of water treatment facilities, which is something that most people would just kind of laugh at until you discover how precious water is to life. And that's something that's becoming, in this decade, much more important.
And I grew up with Dad sitting there grading stacks of papers. I mean, they almost went 2 or 3 feet tall.
He had some ways that he marked up the paper that, I guess I will never forget. He'd write AWK, and that stood for awkward. I didn't write very well back then. After all, I was an engineer. We had to rewrite those papers until he thought they were okay.
He really forced them to not take the lazy way out and just throw a paper on the desk and say, that's it. He wanted them to really master the topic.
Dr. Luebbers has always given us little bits and pieces of scientific information, and I think he was very willing in trying to impart all the knowledge he had to us.
So he was a chemical engineering professor, but he also was a woodworker.
Trees were a major thing in Dad's life.
His dad had planted 3 oak trees on the site, and that they would gather for conversation under those oak trees, and we decided we were going to take those trees, make them part of the intricate woodwork that was going to be part of the Academic Success Center, and to tell the story of Professor Luebbers, his home, and the educational experience that had taken place there for decades, and literally have it come back to life in the community.
Professor Luebbers would greatly enjoy knowing that you were able to recycle his oak tree.
I'm glad to see that that parcel of land is still in use to support students going to campus.
Professor Luebbers would be so pleased to know over 700 students had the opportunity to walk to campus.
The Professor Luebbers story really did touch us in a very meaningful way. And that is to look for things that are historical to the site, the campus, the environment there, and attempt to capture, to bring more of the local history and the feel of the local community into the developments that we're undertaking.
To future tenants of Turner, enjoy your time on campus, work not just in the classroom, but get to know other people outside of the classroom. and join those professional groups that are offered to you on campus.